Oklahoma State sending running backs to the NFL on a regular basis is the expectation, and obviously that will not change with the drafting of Ollie Gordon. But before Chris Carson made a name for himself in the NFL, he was largely forgotten about at OSU, kind of like another dude.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we get to jump right into this conversation of some of the running backs at Oklahoma State traditionally have been known to do some miraculous things in college and turn that into a very successful NFL career. Of course, currently you've got guys like Chuba Hubbard and Jalen Warren and Justice Hill out here doing the daggone thing. And of course, Tyreek Hill was a running back at one point in time at Oklahoma State. But before Chris Carson made a name for himself in the NFL and rushed for almost 3,600 yards with the Seattle Seahawks, he was largely forgotten about. Because at Oklahoma State, his first year being one of the most heralded JUCO guys in the country, he came to Oklahoma State. And his first year, 2015, he did rush for a little over 500 yards, but he only hit it like 3.8 yards per clip because he was trying to do a little bit too much. He was trying to shimmy and shake and dip, dive, duck, dodge, instead of just lowering his shoulder and being an absolute animal in the red zone, on the goal line, in 4th and 1 scenarios. Fast forward to the next year where he kind of had to give way to some degree to a emerging Justice Hill. It was a true thunder and lightning package, though, because Chris Carson figured something out. He's talked about it. Pete Carroll's talked about it. Even Mike Gundy's talked about it. For Chris Carson, it was just an acceptance of a different role. He wasn't out there trying to juke guys and make guys miss 24/7. He was there to run you over or jump over you. Those are the things that allowed Chris Carson to excel. And then, of course, his career at the Seahawks speaks for itself. He had multiple 1,000-yard seasons. He was a Pro Bowl level running back for the Seahawks. And until some, catastrophic, like spinal style of injuries, he probably would still be toting the rock in the NFL today. But after a very successful career in the NFL, you look back to his time at Oklahoma State, and it was just that mental makeup that needed to have a little bit of an adjustment for him to make it make sense. Him being the Thunder to Justice Hill's Lightning was allowed him to flourish. And again, it was a mental mindset style of scenario that he had to adjust to. And I think likewise, Trent Howland has the same capabilities. Now, of course, Chris Carson's 5'11", 220-pound running back. Trent Howland is 6'3", 240 pounds. So there's a little bit of a differentiation there between the sizing, but the running style seems to be somewhat similar. And I think for Oklahoma State fans, you see Trent Howland rocking number 24. It does kind of lead you even back to some of the Elijah Collins stuff. And of course, Elijah Collins had to give way to Ollie Gordon. And then Ollie Gordon goes on and have over a 1,700-yard season, wins the Doak Walker Award. And then this previous year, he still rushed for almost 900 yards while getting hit in the backfield almost 51% of the time. Trent Howland has the capability to be a Chris Carson style of running back at Oklahoma State. And I think, again, just that acceptance of a little bit of a different role is going to be huge for him. Now, of course, Trent Howland, after being the leading rusher for Indiana, comes to Oklahoma State. And I believe that the sales pitch was partially that, hey, we got to keep Ollie Gordon healthy. We know he's going to get he's going to do his thing, but we need some people to come in and spell Ollie Gordon fairly significantly. Due to the way the season kind of progressed, that wasn't really an applicable scenario anymore for Trent Howland, Rodney Fields, Sesi Vailahi, or anybody else, just because we were trying to find our footing. So now when you look at the fact that Trent Howland came back after not really being utilized this previous season as he had thought coming in, there was obviously a very big to-do around keeping Trent Howland. Now, if you've seen some of the projections coming out for the depth chart, most everybody has Rodney Fields starting. And my question would be as to why. Do we just forget that Trent Howland was able to do some things pretty miraculously at Indiana, not to mention what Indiana was able to do this previous season? Do we not remember that this dude does have more capabilities out of the backfield that we didn't even necessarily see a whole lot at Indiana. So I think that this season for Trent Howland, Oklahoma State, he's probably going to trim down a little bit, try to streamline this thing. But I think we've seen from Chris Carson's evolutionary process from his time at Oklahoma State, his junior year, senior year, to flourishing to a massive NFL career. Part of it was becoming more of the known. And that is what Trent Howland is here to provide. Trent Howland and Jaden Allen Hendricks are both massive individuals that will likely provide that Thunder style of packaging. But I think Trent Howland, much like Chris Carson's ability to jump over dudes while also running through dudes, is going to be able to showcase a lot of that this season. I think that Rodney Fields had a phenomenal freshman year. I think Sesi Vailahi is still that Jalen Warren-esque style of running back that just needs to kind of see some things come together for him. But Trent Howland was a dude already in the Big Ten, and we seem to be forgetting that this 6'3", 240-pound absolute monstrosity has come back to Oklahoma State via a sales pitch from the coaching staff, accentuating, we need you to fill this role. We need you to fill this void. Some of the things that Ollie Gordon was good at, Trent Howland is also good at. Some of the elusivity in the open field, maybe a little bit of a differentiation here, but this is, again, where Trent Howland can look a lot like Chris Carson. And I know Trent Howland, watching Chris Carson highlights, we've had this conversation before, and I firmly believe that he recognizes that it might take a little bit of a mental shift for him to accomplish everything that he set out to when he came to Stillwater America, but it's all still ahead of him. And again, the blank slate aspect is going to provide every running back in that room the ability to compete right away. I firmly believe that Trent Howland has all of the capabilities to be running back one. And then you're going to have somebody like Rodney Fields and Sesi Vailahi, obviously fill perhaps a running back 3 style of role where they're coming out of the backfield and they're getting in on the passing game. But I think Trent Howland can also do that. What you saw out of Chris Carson at Oklahoma State and what you saw out of Chris Carson with the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like is the correct trajectory for what Trent Howland can be this season in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is obviously going to be able to catapult him to yet another Cowboy getting drafted in the NFL. And as Chris Carson proved, it doesn't matter if it's 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. You can go be an all-pro individual as long as the mindset is applicable. I think that this is going to be a big year for Oklahoma State running back room. Even without necessarily winning a Doak Walker Award, if you have a Thunder and Lightning package where you have, let's say Trent Howland gets something comparable to Chris Carson's senior year, which is almost 600 yards. Well, the difference between Chris Carson, he went from 3.8 yards a carry to like 6.9 yards a carry. That is the transcendence that I expect to see out of Trent Howland, and I think that Trent Howland understands that this is his opportunity to grab the bull by the horns and make something miraculous happen for himself and to kind of get Oklahoma State running backs into yet another draft cycle. Terry, you got a dude. I'm excited to see what Trent can finally do with the full complement of the offense at his disposal. Instead of just being a piece to come in and spell somebody like an Ollie Gordon, this is going to be his opportunity to be the main 1-2 combo here. I'm excited for Trent Howland. I'm ready for Oklahoma State running backs to continue to flourish and provide a lot of stability at that position if you're looking to get to the NFL. Oklahoma State is a destination place for running backs. It always has been, and it always should be. I think Trent Howland and Rodney Fields having a big season could accentuate that once again, that if you're coming to Oklahoma State and you bide your time as a running back, you're going to have capabilities to get yourself to the league. Speaking of getting to the league, do not bog yourself down in tax season. It's big league time. Ladies and gentlemen, dealing with stacks of paperwork is never fun, right? Even if you're an accountant, I'm sure it's not the funnest thing in the world to sit down and stare at numbers 24/7, but you got to do it. It's a necessary evil to some degree. And today we get to talk about TurboTax. Intuit TurboTax is going to help you declutter all of the craziness that comes with filing taxes. Let the experts get in and delay any of your worrying and your waiting and your concerns so you can get money back or have peace of mind. Taxes can be easily uploaded with your forms to a TurboTax expert who will then be matched to your unique tax situation. an expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. That expert will help you work on your taxes and get real-time updates on their progress, and you will get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go about your day without the stressing, without the worrying and the waiting, you can take peace of mind knowing that Intuit TurboTax is on it. Go get an expert on your taxes with TurboTax.com today. Go to TurboTax.com. This is only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Make sure that you get squared away today with TurboTax to relieve the stress, anguish, and the pain of staring at those numbers all day, every day. Let the experts do it to you. Get with Intuit TurboTax. So now we get a shift into the struggles over the last weekend-ish when it comes to both diamond sports, baseball and softball. Baseball, you don't really know what you have, but unfortunately, the beginning of the season does look very status quo for Oklahoma State baseball. You get a bunch of 6'6" dudes, 6'5" dudes, 6'9" dudes that throw 103, or they can hit 115 miles an hour exit velocity off the bat. You can have a lot of those things, as Oklahoma State does, and still find a way to lose games. Now, we began the season against Clemson. Clemson is a perennial power that competes for national titles on a yearly basis. So a 5-6 loss against Clemson is not really anything to scoff at, except for if you watched or paid attention to the game or listened to the game, this was a game that Oklahoma State should have won. By all intents and purposes, Oklahoma State has more talent than Clemson, yet we find a way to lose. No big deal. We got a game, too, against another typical perennial power in Louisville. Louisville's a team that's always looking to punch a ticket to Arlington, so this would be a big win. And it was, figuratively and physically, 12-3. We absolutely dominated Louisville. The bats got hot, and it showed us that Oklahoma State is full of dudes up and down the lineup that can jack home runs. Whether it be the leadoff all the way down to the 9-man, the DH, it doesn't matter. Oklahoma State has heavy-handed hitters that can absolutely go yard anywhere in the country. The problem is you're feast or famine, right? When you're a bang or bust ball club, when you're not banging or the other team's banging with you, they're just waiting on you to make a mistake. And my complaint has always been the management of the staff by Rob Walton, not the quality of individuals that we have, but just the management. And if you look at the Texas game, I think you could make the argument that was bad mismanagement. The pitching staff as a whole, it's not bad. It's not bad by any stretch. I like Harrison Bodendorf. I love the angle that he comes from. He's a 4-pitch guy who has the capability to keep the batters on their heels, so they never really know what's coming. And, even though he wasn't 100% on the other day, he was able to do more than enough to get us out of situations that allowed us to get a W. And, Texas is Texas, right? And you got to give credit where credit's due. If we have guys up and down the lineup that can drop bombs, Texas does too, right? They started the game with a home run out of their 2-hole. They had guys up and down the lineup that were hitting with power. They were pretty smart on the base pass. Now, there was a couple instances, both between the Clemson game and the Texas game, where the umpires got a little loosey-goosey. And I don't know if that's necessarily an indictment on Oklahoma State or Texas or Clemson, as it is more of a concern that the umpires are getting less and less and less accurate and knowledgeable as the years seem to progress. I hate the idea of having the robotic, pitch counter in the back where like it's laser guided balls and strikes. I don't necessarily like that. I don't like taking the human element out of the game. But unfortunately, even with replay, somehow these dudes are finding creative ways to get things wrong. That is not an excuse for where Cowboy baseball was over the weekend. Losing 2 out of 3 is not acceptable. And I guess kind of like softball and even to some degree basketball, it depends on where your expectations are. And perhaps my expectations have been too high. The expectations of Cowboy baseball is to go to Omaha every single year, host a super regional every single year to give yourself an opportunity to get to Omaha, competing for Big 12 titles, finishing top 3 in the conference. These are all expectations in baseball, but we obviously have some limitations somewhere, whether it's small ball capabilities, it's crunch time, it's pitching management. Nobody can argue that Rob Walton gets the most out of pitchers, but it's his mismanagement of the staff that has always been a head scratcher to me, and even to some degree in the hitting department. But we do have the opportunity to kind of rewrite some wrongs. We've got a game this evening against Texas State, followed by a 3-game stretch at O'Brayton, Stillwater against UT Arlington, who also just competed in the same tournament over the weekend. So we're gonna have some time to get right, but we better get right because then we have Tennessee, Texas A&M, Mississippi State before we go to Dallas Baptist and we host West Virginia, who's a pretty salty ball club. This baseball team is already having me pulling my hair out, and we're very early on in the season. Now we'll shift gears here to softball. Likewise, they've got us pulling our hair out. If we call the bipolar Big 12 absolute madness, well, we can call Cowgirl softball equally as bipolar. We begin the season with one of the top teams in the country, top 10 team, Florida State, and we beat them somewhat convincingly. So it looked like, oh my gosh, this is going to be another team that's going to punch their ticket to OKC, the equivalency of Omaha. Maybe we have a chance because OU doesn't have quite the juggernauts that they've had the last couple of years. And then we lose to Louisiana Tech, a very respectable ball club in Louisiana Tech, beat Northern Colorado. Then we get absolutely destroyed by Florida State. So their get-right game made us look bad. And I also did find out from some Florida State people, for whatever reason, in that first game, they pitched like their number 3. And then the second game against us, they pitched their ace, and it showed. And then we take on another perennial power in softball, which is UCLA. We had capabilities to win that game. We did not. But that's, again, you lose to Florida State, that's respectable. Losing to UCLA, that's respectable. You beat Kentucky, okay, not bad. And then the bipolar kicks in. You turn around and beat a top 5 team in Texas A&M. Then you lose to Auburn, and you turn around and beat a top 15 team in Alabama. I don't know. And, I think Ruby Malin is very, very good. But I think this shows that we've been so spoiled with some of the most dominant, not only pitchers, but also hitters in all of college softball out of Oklahoma State's roster. Now, the hitting is probably more concerning than the pitching. We're known as a team that typically has the ability to hit all over the yard, all up and down the lineup. Plus, we have some ladies that could come off the bench and do equally as good. The timely hitting is not very good right now. The ability, like last year, to hit so many home runs, we were literally never out of a ball game ever. It didn't matter what the score was. That doesn't seem to be the case this season. Carly Godwin obviously carries a big bat, but I've noticed we've got several of the drag, swing, and bunt individuals, which typically you see a couple here and there, but to have multiple in the starting lineup, it's not a typical hitting Oklahoma State ball club. We're used to having girls like Cheyenne Factor and Audrey Snide-Miller just sit back in the box and pepper the yard. That's not what we have this year. It seems as though we're more predicated upon speed. In order for your speed to work out, you got to put the ball in play. And we're not putting the ball in play with girls in scoring position. That was the most concerning statistic over the weekend for me. Maybe it was Texas. At one point in time, we were on the tournament. We were like 3 for 17 with runners in scoring position. And that's just not a good recipe. So it is very uncharacteristic of Kenny Gajewski's ball clubs to not have timely hitting, to not drive girls in whenever they're in scoring position. We're used to having a dominant pitcher that would shut down everybody to the point that they weren't even really going to hit the ball. You could almost bank on the fact that your Sam Shows of the world, that your Carrie Eberleys of the world, that your Lexi Kilfoyles of the world were so dominant that it didn't really matter. That is not the case this year. I think Katie Coots is very talented, but she's hittable. Ruby Malin, extremely talented, but she's hittable, and she walks more girls than some of the other individuals did. Kyra Aycock, She was an All-American coming out of high school. She dealt with a lot of injuries last year, but she has the power. She can throw over 70 miles an hour, which is like the equivalent to 100 in baseball. We gotta figure it all out. And Riley Crandall, she does not look like the shutdown All-American that she did last year at Baylor. Watching her last year at Baylor, when she was on the mound, they could beat Oklahoma State, they could beat OU, they could beat Texas. She's just not the same Riley Crandall's the previous year. Now, it is still Kenny Gajewski. We have a phenomenal staff, and we have beaten some of the top teams in the country. Now, we've lost some games that we absolutely shouldn't have either. But again, this is catering of expectations. If you expected Oklahoma State to compete for a national title this year, then so far it's been pretty underwhelming and pretty disappointing. If you're just happy with Oklahoma State competing for a Big 12 title and maybe getting to Omaha, a.k.a. OKC, then we look good. But for Oklahoma State standards, for Kenny Gajewski standards, this is not acceptable. And the same has to be said for baseball. Rob Walton is a genius, and he's good at recruiting, but he is horrendous at management. I've never understood it. How you can be an absolute legend, but not being able to tell when your pitchers are falling off the side of the mound, or they're not hitting their spots, or they're throwing the wrong combinations. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me how Rob Walton can be so phenomenal at several areas, but seemingly very incompetent in this one area. And it's just been the same for years with Rob Walton. It's always just been about management of the rotation, when to pull guys, when not to pull guys, what guys should come in relief. Are you playing the righty-righty matchup, lefty on lefty match? Are you playing those matchups? And if so, I don't know. Are we just getting guys to try to have a feel? Because Gabe Davis looked like, he's still nursing that collarbone injury back, as expected. Harrison Bodendorf looked pretty much like I thought he would. Then you have Stormy Rhodes came in as a freshman, looked really good. We love Noah Weck as a freshman, but he's got some things to kind of work through. Likewise, Batty came in as a sophomore, did not look very good, didn't have control of the zone. Drew Blake is somebody that is kind of he's more of a pitch to contact guy, but he's got some swing and miss capabilities. And then Mario Pesca, it appears as though he's going to be a closer as opposed to a relief arm. Obviously, they don't have him really tabbed as a starter. We'll get it. We'll get it finagled one way or another. And I really like the Grand Canyon transfer as a lefty. He had good numbers as a true freshman. I think he's going to end up being good. He looked phenomenal at times against Texas, but he had times where he obviously missed the mark, gave up some walks, gave up some runs. And when you're playing a team like Texas, that much like Oklahoma State can hit the long ball all up and down the lineup, those are things that you got to pay attention to. So are we completely changing the expectations for Cowboy baseball? No, because we do have a murderer's row of a bunch of top 10 teams still to play, especially SEC squads. So the best is yet to come, but we've got a lot to iron out before we get there. And I'd be a liar if I didn't say I was slightly concerned. Just slightly, though. We'll switch over to hoops here. Like I say, it was a rough weekend to be an Oklahoma State fan because the Cowgirls lost some softball games. They don't typically lose. Cowboy baseball did, unfortunately, what they've been doing the last few years, which is hammering home runs or striking out all up and down the lineup. It's frustrating. And then the Cowgirls still have the capability to win a regular season Big 12 title, and we just kind of pooped that away with a loss to like a 3-10 BYU. And this has been the trouble with J.C. Hoyt's Cowgirls this season. She's even talked about how sometimes we play different when we're ranked. When we have a number next to our name, sometimes we don't play the same. And this has been the troubling factor for Cowgirl basketball. We have beaten every single team ranked ahead of us, but we lose We lost to KU, which is third, fourth, last in the Big 12. We lost to Houston, which is like last in the Big 12. And now we lose to BYU, which is hovering like bottom third of the Big 12. So we can beat the best teams in America, but we can also lose to the worst teams as well. It's tough to grasp because the teams ahead of us, the Baylors, TCUs, Kansas States, they don't typically drop games that they shouldn't. I know K-State lost to Colorado in Boulder, but even Colorado has more ability than Houston and BYU. KU is decent, but Houston and BYU are just rough. Those are rough losses. So now we've essentially taken ourselves out of contention for the regular season Big 12 title unless some wild things happen ahead of us, but it's very unlikely. We do have the opportunity to kind of get right again. And we are still ranked. I don't know if that's good or not. I guess we'll find out this evening as the Cowgirls take on Utah. So this is an opportunity. We got beat by a bad BYU team. Now we get a chance at redemption against an almost equally as bad Utah squad. And now we're looking at seeding for the Big 12 tournament. We're still looking at the overall record to figure out where we're going to kind of sit in the March Madness style of scenario. But we still have a lot of things ahead of us. Postseason is still ahead of us. Winning the Big 12 tournament title is still a possibility. If J.C. Hoyt can just get these girls to play the same every night, we'll make a massive run in March. But we're very up and down. We can beat anybody. But somehow we're the only team in the top 4 or 5 of the Big 12 that is susceptible to the last place teams in the conference. So it's that discrepancy that is obviously an issue for J.C. Hoyt and the Cowgirls. But thankfully, we've got a little bit of time here yet to figure that out. The problem has been stringing consecutive games together. We play miraculously, and then we fall apart. And we play really good, and then we play average. Then we play great, and then we fall apart. That seems to be the stream for Cowgirl basketball this year. And that is concerning only because, let's say March Madness comes around and we win the first round. And let's say that we have a massive upset in the third round or the second round. That means we're probably not going to win the third round or vice versa. If first round is a massive upset, doesn't really give you the warm and fuzzies for round 2. We have time to get it turned around. The Cowboys, on the other hand, do not have time to get much turned around. It seemed like we were playing better, winning 2 of our last 3. We had the opportunity to win 3 of 4. Of course, you have a top 15 Texas Tech coming into Cowgirl. Nobody expected it to be a W, but getting beat by multiple touchdowns hasn't happened this year in Cowgirl. So I have to give credit where credit's due. The only thing I asked of Steve Lutz in year 1 was to protect Cowgirl. Make that such a disastrous place for opposing teams to want to. They don't even want to travel to Stillwater, Oklahoma. They don't want to play in Cowgirl. That's what it was like under, Eddie Sutton. We're reaching way back. But there was even moments under the Travis Ford era that number 1 ranked KU coming into Cowgirl did not mean they were going to win. Number 3 ranked Texas Tech coming into Cowgirl usually meant a loss. It didn't matter how good you are. It didn't matter what your ranking was. Playing in Cowgirl was a nightmare for everybody. We're 9-3 at home. So until this Texas Tech game, we'd kind of done that. That was mission accomplished. Now, Texas Tech put it on us in Cowgirl Arena. They took us behind the woodshed and taught us a thing or 17. But by and large, he's done what I asked him to do this year, which is take care of Cowgirl. That's what he's done. Next season, obviously, it's different. You've protected Cowgirl this year. You have the ability to go out with a 10-win season in Gallagher. If you're 2-11 on the road, whatever, we can deal with that. That's what next season's for. But the first step had to be protect Cowgirl. And until Texas Tech just dribbled our head up and down the court, we'd been protecting Gallagher. So overall, it was an ugly loss and what has been a somewhat ugly season. But he's protected Gallagher up until this game. And for that, I'm appreciative. All right, y'all. I'm also appreciative of you. Of course, as always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike if you don't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast people out there, you know what to do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. Do what you do. I appreciate you. Later, taters.